Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. My name is Angelia, and today it's Friday Reads for September 30th. Before I get started talking about reading and other things, I just want to say that I've been watching the hurricane footage, and it's really pretty shocking and awful. So, if any of you are in Florida or have friends or family there, I hope everybody is okay. I have family in South Carolina and several in the Charleston area, so I'm watching that closely today. I can't see it, wore my Charleston t-shirt today, and I did talk to my mom yesterday, and they had laid in their provisions for a power outage and all of that, so I hope that everything is okay. I'll check on them a little bit later, but I do have my mom, my stepfather, I have a niece, all in the Charleston area, and then my brother and his family a little bit inland. So I talked to him yesterday as well. So hopefully it will not be too severe. And so thinking good thoughts about them and the people in Florida. And I hope everybody watching this is also safe as well. So before I talk about books, I don't have anything new to say about the shows that we've been watching. Same ones, almost at the end of Reservation Dogs for the season. The British baking show's just gotten started, only a couple episodes. I guess we get to watch a new one tonight. Right now, I'm just really obsessed with Better Call Saul, and we are realizing now that it's like it's going to turn into this thing where we're going to end up having to watch Breaking Bad again because now we're thinking about the things happening in Better Call Saul and going, well, wait a minute. When it gets to Breaking Bad, that, like there's certain things, there's tense situation, but we're like, well, but he's still alive later because he's in Breaking Bad. So it's right now I'm just like really, really obsessed with the horrendous brotherly dynamics of Jimmy and Chuck. That's like I sit around and think about it like you think about a book. Like it's just really good. I don't know how we missed out on it the first time around. All right, but anyway, this video is about books, so let's talk about books. So this week I did finish 2 books, and I'm almost done with a third. I did not mention this third book in my September wrap up because I didn't know that I was going to get that far. I was on another book when I was making that video, and I thought that was the last book, but somehow I had time for another one. But first of all, the first book, the one that I was in the middle of last week, was Fairy Tale by Stephen King. I enjoyed this book a lot. I'll tell you a little bit about it, but not too much. And first of all, if you're a Stephen King fan, I think that you will like it unless you are a fan of strictly the most like scary kind of ones. If you are a fan of his because you like his storytelling skills, I think that you will like the book. If you're a big fantasy fan, like a big hardcore time fantasy fan, you might not like it because it's kind of on the lighter side of fantasy. But if you are an occasional fantasy reader, as I am, then maybe I think you will like it. So basically in this story, we have Charlie Reed, a boy who lives with his dad. His mother dies tragically when he is only 7, and this sends his father into a despair and alcoholism. And at a very dark moment in his childhood, Charlie prays for a miracle and kind of makes a deal with God or whoever might be listening, if only his father could get better. So years in the future, things are better in their family, and Charlie meets an old man who lives in a creepy old house with his elderly dog, and this man needs help. So Charlie begins to help Mr. Bowditch, who is mysterious, gruff, and has a strange padlocked shed in his backyard from which sometimes bizarre scuffling, banging sounds emerge. So that's the setup, and eventually we do find out piece by piece some more things about Mr. Bowditch and what might be in the shed. And that beginning part of the book, which is like the first 150 to 200 pages, I really, really loved. The slow build up, the character building, the mystery, I loved it a lot. Then when we actually find out what's in the shed, kind of in the middle of the book, for me, there was sort of a lag where um, it wasn't, even though it's supposed to be, Charlie finding out all these fascinating things, they weren't that fascinating to me but then in the final third, like it all picks up again. And I think it's because new characters were sort of developed. And I'm kind of a character person, and also, kind of first and then a plot second. Um, so like if I'm watching a movie and there's like a lot of action scenes or fight scenes or war scenes, I space out and start daydreaming about other stuff. But if it's about characters and conflicts and challenges and struggles, then that's more interesting to me. So there was sort of a dip in there where they had to do like the setup of a fantasy location, and then it kind of got going again because the plot picked up and a new band of characters kind of came into the story. There is a dog that is important in the story named Radar, and I will rate this book dog safe. If you are worried, as I was, about dogs in a story, it's okay to go ahead and read the book, and that's all I'm going to say about that. But it has it's called Fairy Tale, and it is a fairy tale, and it has all of the traditional aspects of a fairy tale. Things like somebody goes on a quest and they think that what they're doing is one purpose, but then they find out there's a larger problem at hand and that they have to do something about it. It has some actual characters from folklore and fairy tales, like the actual ones appear, or archetypes of those types of characters. And the way that the familiar archetypes and patterns and tropes are, the way that he kind of gets away with them in this book is for Charlie to recognize and acknowledge those as he goes along. Near the beginning of the story, he's reminded of Jack and the Beanstalk, and he goes to the library, looks up some old grim fairy tales, and he's thinking about the sanitized versions of those versus the original ones, which are dark and grisly. And that's kind of what happens here, is that the dark and grisly aspects do come into play because it is a Stephen King story, and there's good versus evil, both in a world and what you have to confront within yourself, your dark side and your lighter side. And Charlie, as a young man, does consider how he fits into this kind of a world where magic might occur, where evil, where the future is at stake and things like that. So that's all I'm going to say. It is fun. It is not, a heavy literary academic kind of a deal. It's a fun fantasy adventure book with very traditional themes, handled by a very experienced and good storyteller. So that is Fairy Tale. I had fun with it. It was really good. Then the other book that I was reading was If I Survive You by Jonathan Escoffery. This book was longlisted for the National Book Award. It is a collection of interconnected stories about a young man named Trelawney that it's mainly in his young adulthood, and his family. His parents are Jamaican immigrants. His brother Delano was born in Jamaica. The family came over. Trelawney was born in the U.S., and it is about his experience trying to navigate the world in Miami as a Jamaican immigrant, or I guess he's actually not an immigrant, but his family is. Get it out, Angelia. His family are immigrants, and issues of racial identity, cultural identity, and just basically surviving in a tough world. A lot of the stories take place around the year 2009, when Trelawney graduates from college right into a recession, and he doesn't go immediately to college. He's not like, he doesn't have like one of these dream stories, the first person to go to college, although he is, but he actually works for many years and then goes to college, works hard for those years, and then he gets out and there's no jobs. So there's some very harsh and realistic aspects of that about when you're the only person in your family who's gone off and become educated, then you come back and you still don't have anything. You have nowhere to live. You don't have a job. You don't know what to do. He lives in his car for a while. There's a whole story where he has an office job at a senior living center, and he sneaks around at night and tries to sleep in the model unit after hours, and just different things like that that are very realistic, um, more realistic than the fantasy American dream of if you go to college, then you'll be prepared and you'll get a good job and everything will be great. But most of us know it's not always like that. My favorite story was actually not about Trelawney at all. It was about his cousin, Kooky, or Kooky, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, and his uh, experience with his mostly absentee father and the summers that he spent working with him and what happens at the end of that story. So that one is kind of almost a standalone. Trelawney and his group are mentioned in the story, but it's really about another set of people. And I don't know if that story like independently appeared in a magazine or something, so it stands alone pretty well. And that's actually was the standout story in the collection to me. But overall, I did enjoy it. I didn't connect and feel as invested and concerned and wrapped up in these characters as much as I did when I read Night of the Living Rez. And I don't really think it's fair to compare, but it just sort of happens because I read them so close together. But it is really good. And some people might like this book better, but that was my overall assessment of that. But it does hang together as a story collection, so it's a book to read all the way through at once and not, in and out. Okay, so I thought that I was going to be out of time at that point because Fairy Tale was so long, but now I am about 3/4 of the way through Telephone by Percival Everett. So after I read The Trees, that sort of introduced me to Percival Everett, and I wondered, how have I not even heard of this writer? And I find out he's written like 30 books. So Telephone is the book that came out preceding The Trees, and then he has a new book that's about to come out as well. But the Telephone is very different in subject matter, tone, mood, theme than The Trees. So if you've read The Trees, you know that it is deals with really tough subject matter about racism, violence, police brutality, social inequality, but that there's a lot of satire, broad humor. It's kind of wacky, and this book's not wacky whatsoever. In this book, we have a professor named Zach Wells, who is a geology professor, and he has this really, really niche specialty where he is the expert about this one particular cave in the Grand Canyon. So it's super esoteric, and some of the stories about like departmental stuff at his college, with people trying to get tenure and things like that. And then a lot of it is about his home life. He has a wife and daughter. The daughter is a kind of a middle school age child, and early on in the story, he and his wife discover that his daughter has an incurable genetic disease that is progressive, untreatable, and degenerative. And so this is very, very horrible, and it starts to unravel his family life and his marriage and his own mental health. And at the same time, he had ordered a jacket online from eBay, and he finds a note in Spanish asking for help. The note says "help us" in Spanish. And so he orders something else from the same source, and he finds another note. So the story, the whole first half of the story is kind of about finding out about the illness. That happens really early on, but then it's actually going to shift now into him trying to find out who is sending these distress notes hidden in these shirts. So I'm not sure how these two major topics are going to blend together, but at the point of the story I am at, well, I'm not going to tell you because it'll give it away. But anyway, the tone is not wacky. It is sad. It's melancholic. It's reflective. There are trigger warnings for suicide and suicidal thoughts. It's doesn't have, and there's a couple of funny descriptions, but it doesn't really have that kind of weird counterpart of the humor. So it's a different kind of book. It's really good. I've read it really fast. Like I want to know what Zach is going to do and what he's going to find out about the notes. And I mean, it's kind of obvious what's going to happen at home because they find that out very early. But anyway, that's Telephone so far. So it's another winner for me by Percival Everett. And I'll let you know next week what I thought overall when I get to the end. Okay, so the other thing was I did my Shorty September, the 30 books in 30 days. Spoiler, I didn't really do 30 different authors. I think I ended up at like 26 or 27 because I traveled, I left out a couple days, and then I fizzled out at the end. I read some books where I went ahead and read the whole book of short stories, so I didn't read a different author. So what I read was a lot of different stories in 30 days. And my takeaway from the project was that it really revived my love of short stories. And there were so many. There was things that people recommended that I didn't get to. There were things I found around in my library that I didn't get to. So what I'm going to do going on in the future is to remember to read 1 or 2 short stories every week. And I will include whatever I did happen to read in Friday Reads. So I'm not finished, but the month of Shorty September is over. So the stories that I actually read this week, very quickly. First, I read the first story in Bliss Montage by Ling Ma. And I got this book recently. I really loved her novel Severance, so I got her new book, which are these short stories. And I only read the first one. It was very weird, and I don't know what to make of it, and I need to read further on in this collection to see if there's some kind of, I don't know, maybe something's going to coalesce. Because the first story was called Los Angeles, and it basically was a story about a woman who lives in a very upscale home in Los Angeles with her family, her husband and children, but there's also her 100 ex-boyfriends are living in the house as well, almost like ghosts that are just sort of with her everywhere she goes. So I don't even know what to make of this story because it's presented as though they are actually tangibly there, but I mean, are they psychologically there? I was a little confused. The jury is out about this collection of stories. I need to go further before I can say anything else. Then I returned to an essay that I really loved from this book. I read this earlier this year. It's These Precious Days by Patchett. It's her most recent book, and I love this whole book, and I highly recommend it. But the one that I circled back to was one that kind of resonated personally with me, which is called How to Practice. And in this book, in this essay, at the beginning of the essay, she talks about her childhood friend that lived nearby, and her friend lived with her single divorced dad, who lived in the same condo for decades. And at the beginning of the essay, he has passed away, and she and her friend are trying to go through this condo, and there's just so much, because this guy was a drama teacher. He had many different enthusiasms, and he just stockpiled millions and millions and millions of things that they have to go through. And so she is thinking that she does not want to do that to her friends and family upon, when she passes someday. So she decides that it's time to go through all this stuff in her own house and start getting rid of stuff. And the reason why this resonates with me, because when she's doing all of this, It is in the summer and fall of 2020. And she finds herself at home more and having time to actually tackle this project. And the exact same thing happened to us, because at that same time, we were at home more and we were preparing to get a large house to sell. It was time to get ready to sell, preceding our retirement, and then we had a downsizing plan. And so we were doing the exact same thing when she was doing this thing. And the stuff that just regurgitates out of, when your house is too big for you and you have all these nooks and crannies and cabinets and closets, I found that, you think that you're going through things regularly, but you're only going through the visible things on the surface, and that your house can be harboring many, many mysterious items. And that is what Ann Patchett discovers. And she just finds, all kinds of, she realizes that she went through a time where she collected place settings and silverware when she was really young. And then she has 3 manual typewriters and all this stuff. And there was a paragraph that stood out to me that I shall now share. And she says, "What I owned didn't surprise me half as much as how I felt about it." And this is the key. This is what makes this project so slow. "The unexpected shame that came from having 7 mixing bowls, the guilt over never having made good use of the electric juicer my mother had given me, and strangest of all, my consistent anthropomorphizing of inanimate objects. How would those plastic plates with pictures of chickadees on them feel when they realized they were on their way to the basement? It was as if I had run my fingers across some unexpected lump in my psyche. Jesus, what was that?" And that, to me, I was like, Ann Patchett has seen into my soul, because that is exactly what happened when I had to go through all of that stuff. It was an unexpected lump in my psyche. But somehow, obviously, we got through it. We sold the house, and now we live in the house of our dreams down here on the coast. And we still have too much junk, and it is still crammed into our new and limited closet space. So anyway, that essay really hit me. All right, then also I read the first story in Stories from the Tenants Downstairs by Sidik Fofana. This is also a new book that is a collection of related stories about the people who live in Banneker Terrace, an apartment complex in Harlem, and the people are all in danger of being booted out, and the apartment owners are edging towards gentrification. I only read the first story, but this is about Mimi, who lives in apartment 14D. Mimi is several months behind on the rent. The entire story, the structure is all the different things and attempts she does to get together this rent money on time. And she finds out that people are being given notices of eviction if they are in any kind of arrears, because they want to start moving people out and raising the rents and kind of turning this complex over into a higher income kind of dwelling. So I think that each story is going to be about a different resident and their particular challenges in the face of the changing times. So in the first story, though, it's just I found out that a rent party is a thing where you have a party with a cover charge to try to get together the money. She tries to she's waiting tables, she's braiding hair, but at the same time she realizes that she also has spending problems, because she has a penchant for buying luxury items instead of setting aside the money for rent. So she's got a shopping issue. So I hope my assumption is that when we move around to different people, that we will see some of the other people as part of the tapestry in other people's stories. So she talks about different residents of the building, and I guess when I hear about those people, I'll get to check in and make sure Mimi is still there and did not get evicted. All right, the next one is one that I don't recommend to anybody. It was from the collection Burning Bright by Rash, and I read the story Hard Times. It was harsh. It was terrible. It is well written. I read a novel by his. That's why I picked up this book at a thrift store, but I hated this story. And so then I skimmed through to see if there was another story. Maybe I just, hit it wrong on this one. And I read another one and it was like, nope, not that one either. So the reason why I hated the story is, I will sum it up as something about a dog. That's all I'm going to say. So if you also will hate a story because about something with a dog, don't read it. And it's a story about some people that are during the Depression, and no, don't read that story. All right, so sorry, Rash, but 2 strikes and you're out. I'm going to probably let that book go. And then the last one, obviously I did not do 7 stories, but the last one I did read an old favorite, which was A Perfect Day for Banana Fish from the collection 9 Stories by J.D. Salinger. And it occurs to me that I must have been a pretty weird teenager, that this was like my favorite short story at that time, because it is a very tragic story. It doesn't end on a happy note if you've never read it before, but it is kind of an essential story to read if you're interested in Salinger and the fictional glass family that he talks about in several of his writings. And so what I realized upon reading A Perfect Day for Banana Fish is that now I need to go back and read this book again that deals more with Seymour Glass, the main character in the story. And anyway, it's a short story about a young man at the beach. I think they're in Florida, and we find out that he's there with his wife. He's on the beach. He has an encounter with a little girl at the beach. His wife is upstairs in their hotel room on the phone with her mother, and it becomes clear that Seymour is unstable. They're discussing some of this, and there's a tragic something or other. So I don't want to give it away if you've never read it, but it is, trigger warning. But it's a really powerful, beautifully written story that I've always loved, even though it is very sad. And I went through a really heavy, hard Salinger phase. This phase is actually still ongoing, but its heyday was, my teens and 20s. And Catcher in the Rye is my all-time favorite novel. And now I realize that I need to go back and read all the other things that aren't Catcher in the Rye again and see how I feel about them now at this point in my life. But to get more about understanding Seymour Glass in that story, you really have to read Raise High, the Roof Beam Carpenters, and Seymour an Introduction, which are more things about Seymour, but in the voice of his brother Buddy. And so anyway, my journeys through short stories have just led to other stories I need to read, longer pieces I need to read. So I'm going to continue a little side project of keeping the short stories flowing in my life. So I hope that you got some good ideas for some reading from my short story project. And I listed the entire list of authors in my September wrap-up if you're interested. Okay, that is it. That was the week in reading. I hope that you had a good week as well. Let me know what you think in the comments about any of these things or other things that I should be looking at. I hope everyone is safe and well this weekend wherever you are, and take care. and I will be back again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.